Hi, the next part, part three, fair use, educational purposes. How to counter the red herring fallacy. In order to successfully counter an argument which contains a fallacious red herring, you must first recognise that a red herring has been used. We saw the formal definition of a red herring argument above, together with a number of examples, but the basic thing to remember is that a red herring argument is an argument that contains information which is irrelevant to the discussion at hand, and which has the goal of serving either as a distraction or as a way to change the topic. Once you recognise that a red herring argument was used, you can counter it by pointing out the red herring and explaining why its use is fallacious. Specifically, you should show that what your opponent said has nothing to do with the original line of discussion, and that the information that they mentioned was used with the goal of changing the topic. Then you can redirect the conversation back to the topic that was originally being discussed, either by adding more comments of your own on the topic or by giving your opponent a chance to reply in a proper way if they use the red herring in response to a question. While this approach can sometimes work, you might encounter situations where the individual you are talking to refuses to return to the original line of discussion, even after you point out the fallacious use of a red herring. When this happens, there are several factors that you should take into account as you decide how to proceed. These include, most notably, the topic which is being discussed, the reason why the other individual wishes to avoid this topic, the context in which the conversation is taking place, the relationship that you have with the individual that you are talking to, the nature of the audience which is watching the conversation, if there is one. Once you take these factors into account, you can pick one of the following strategies with regards to how you should respond to the red herring. Continue with the original line of discussion. This tactic makes sense only if you are absolutely unwilling to change the topic, which can be a reasonable decision in some cases, such as when you want to highlight your opponent's attempts to avoid the topic. If you use this approach, eventually one of you will agree to discuss the topic being proposed by the other, or the two of you might end up talking at each other about different topics in a form of highly unproductive dialogue. See, and this happens a lot. We get these people coming on using the red herring and stuff, changing the subject and everything else, and you point it out and everything. You know they're doing it on purpose, yeah. And like he says, you end up talking past each other. And it's an unproductive dialogue. You're just talking past each other and everything else, and you've got to agree on first principles. Yeah, otherwise you're still talking past each other. Yeah, and there's no point. It's unproductive. You might as well just end it there. No, that's it. Accept the new line of conversation. This entails simply accepting that the topic of the discussion has changed, either with or without pointing out the fallacious use of the red herring. Even though doing this means accepting the use of the red herring, it can sometimes be the only way to ensure that discussion continues in a reasonable and productive manner. But no, I don't think you should. I think if you're on one subject and someone comes along and uses the red herring, you should point that out and you should say, no, look, we're not talking about that. You're changing the subject. We're here to talk about this particular subject, not something different that you're wanting to throw in there because you don't want to talk about that, or you've got no answer for that or whatever. Yeah. Note that in some cases this might be the best course of action. I don't think it is. It could be, or I doubt it. It depends on who you're talking to. Simply because it's the only way to keep the conversation going. It depends on who you're talking to. Like I said, if it's some of these trolls or some of these commenters online, then no. If it's someone in your own personal life, then maybe you could do that, yes. Disengage with the discussion. Sometimes you might realise that there is simply no point to the discussion since your opponent keeps shifting the topic instead of saying anything of value. If you decide that this is the case and that you want to disengage from the discussion, make sure to explain that you're doing it because of your opponent's use of the red herring fallacy and not because you're unwilling to discuss the topics in general. Overall, in theory, the main way to counter the use of a red herring in an argument is to point out its use, explain why it's fallacious, and then return to the original line of discussion. In practice, however, the situation is more complex and this method doesn't always work. Therefore, as long as it's reasonable to do so, you should accept the fact that it's not always possible to successfully counter the use of the red herring arguments. and that in many cases it can be more productive to simply accept the use of the red herring in order to keep the conversation going. But like I said, it depends on who you're talking to. If it's these trolls online, these commenters online, they don't accept the use of the red herring. Bring them back down to the original discussion. Or just disengage. Just say, look, I'm disengaging. I'm not commenting to you no more because you're using the red herring fallacy. You're being fallacious. End off. Give them a description of what the red herring fallacy is, what it means, and stuff like that. What it is, and then just disengage. I mean, that's the best way. Otherwise, you'll be just batting backwards and forwards all day, just talking past each other, commenting past each other, and not getting anywhere, and it'll be just unproductive. Intentional and unintentional use of red herring arguments. I think I'll do this in the next one. Okay, thank you. Bye.